Hey guys, it's Feather here. Today I'm going to talk about two things. The first is going to be a comparison between Shannon Minky and a type of Velboa that I recently got hold of. And the second thing is going to be stretch percentage of your fabric and how to find the percentage of the stretch of your fabric, which is pretty important if you're working with patterns and you want to know what kind of fabric to use. So a few weeks ago I saw a post by Naz. I can't remember if it was on a Twitter or a Patreon to begin with, but if you're not following her on either of those, why aren't you? But she had found a seller who was selling what was described as Minky but also Velboa. And I was pretty excited about this because when I was first looking at plush, I would go around all my favourite artists and look at what they were doing, and they would say, I'm using Minky, I'm using Velboa. And for a long time I was Googling the two, trying to find someone who would sell me this in my country, and although I could find Minky on occasion, I never found a supplier of Velboa that wasn't pony skin or leopard print. So I kind of eventually forgot about it, especially when a couple of websites started up in my country that were selling Shannon fabric, so I just went with Shannon and carried on. So when I saw that the listing description mentioned Velboa, I was kind of excited because I've never had it before. Funnily enough, a couple of weeks ago I found this really old, I think a live journal forum, where people were talking about their favourite fabrics that commissioners would use, and some of them were saying we really liked Velboa because it matched more closely the fabric of official Pokemon plush from the Pokemon Center, and they really liked it when people used that. So it was kind of a really big coincidence that I'd just been shown this link to this person who was selling Velboa. And one of the first things I saw was a listing for some creams and sort of beigey colours and a couple of browns. And I got really excited again because Shannon has never really done anything that I would class as a skin tone. So to see these right off the bat, there's like a peachy colour, a creamy colour, and this beautiful brown that I desperately want to use for Fenris. I was just super excited and bought it straight away and fell in love with it and started buying even more. So I have to show you guys. This is Shannon Cuddle 3 in lavender. And then I have colour number 49 of the 240 colours that the seller has to offer. And also to quickly show you, I have a purple colour from a seller that ships from Korea from eBay. I'll link all these in the description in the video. So Shannon Cuddle 3 has a 3mm pile, and it just always has felt really soft and luxurious. The only one I've ever found longer than that is the Igloo stuff. It's 5mm. They have 3mm and 5mm on sale, and they do have some really nice colours. The only thing I would say about them is sometimes the fabric comes quite ruffled and doesn't always smooth out very well, so when they're bad, they're pretty bad, but when they're good, they're amazing. This is incredibly soft. I adore it and I love it, and it's just so soft. And then on the other end of the scale, the Velboa has a 1.5mm pile. So my first use of it, I actually put it in the hoop wrong. I meant to put it in the hoop this way with the pile facing down. I'd accidentally done it this way, thinking that was down. It wasn't, but using it more, messing with it more, I can now figure out a lot easier which way around to do it. But I really did like it. And the first impression of it was that it did feel slightly flimsier than Shannon, so I got the idea to try doing some stretch tests and some comparisons where I would take the same pattern and make the same pattern with the Shannon and then this to see if there was any major differences. And I'm going to show you those differences. So I'll start with the stretch test. It's something that I learned to do in school, and it is quite important to know. Obviously different fabrics have different stretches, and if you're doing a pattern and it hasn't come out right, maybe it's a little bit skinnier or a bit fatter than you wanted it to be, it can be because of the stretch of the fabric you chose. I did have a customer once come to me and said the pattern didn't work, it's a bad pattern, the Mimikyu, he came out really skinny, his head didn't fit, it was awful. And after a little bit of chatting to the customer, it turned out they'd used curtain fabric instead of what I would have suggested they use, like minky or fleece. And where the minky and fleeces have a horizontal stretch, the curtain fabric had no stretch. So when it came to stuffing, minky likes to expand outwards and make nice little fat plushies, and the curtain fabric, very stiff, very sturdy, didn't stretch at all, which is why they had a skinny mimikyu. And also why I now put fabric recommendations in my patterns. So the first thing we're going to need for a stretch test is a ruler. I have seen sometimes on the backs of patterns you can get like a little chart where you put your fabric against it and stretch, and it'll tell you straight on the percentage of the stretch. I couldn't find any of those today, but you can do it just as easily with a ruler. As you guys know, I'm British, so I tend to work with centimetres. Inches sometimes elude me a little bit, but I went out and I found out how to do it with inches as well as centimetres, so I can show you both today. Okay, so I've taken the ruler down to try and discourage any shuftying while we do this. And first I'm going to do the centimetres, and then I'll flip the ruler over and do the inches. And this is a really good ruler for this kind of thing, for cutting and for measuring, because it starts at 0. There's no margin on this end. So it starts from 0 straight into the measurements. I'm also going to want my pins. So we'll start with the Shannon minky, and what you want to do is fold it away like this, so you're on the crease. If you have a selve edge on the fabric that you're trying to stretch, you need to keep the selve edge away from where you're doing the stretching, because the selve edge has a different texture generally, it can stretch differently and affect your outcome, so fold the selve edge away from where you're doing your stretching. So I'm just going to pop a pin in the edge, like this, and I'm going to measure from the edge to 10 centimetres. And I'm going to pop another pin in there so that I can see where my 10 centimetre mark is. I'm not going to lose it. So now I've got my 10 centimetres, I'm going to hold down the edge of the fabric. I'm going to take the 10 centimetres and I'm going to pull until I start to feel resistance. And whenever I've tested the Shannon, and like we can see now, it's stopping at the 12 centimetre mark. Which means that we have a 20% stretch, and the way it works with centimetres is if you start at 10, if it gets to 12 it's 20, 14 it's 40, 16 60, so on and so forth. So the centimetre type is really easy to remember. It's also a really good test for testing how strong the fabric is, to see if it returns back to that 10 centimetre measurement. So if you want to make sportswear or swimwear and you want to make sure that the fabric can be moved around in and then still return to its original size, you want to make sure that you test a fabric that comes back to 10 centimetres. So if you've stretched fabric and it's come all the way out and then it's come back and it's longer than the 10 centimetres, it's not going to keep its shape if you want to use it for something that you're going to move in. So it's really good for finding out how strong and how stretchy your fabric is. So next we'll do the Velboa, and I'm just going to double check that I've definitely got the horizontal side. I'm going to fold it over, and I'm going to do the same again and pin the edge and pin the 10 centimetre mark. So like I said earlier, my first impression of this fabric was that it felt flimsy, but after doing a few tests and doing a few different pattern tests, I do think it is mostly the length of the fibres that makes it feel flimsy, because 3mm compared to 1.5, pretty big difference when you're feeling fabric widths. So I've got my 10 centimetres, I'm going to hold the edge down and I'm going to pull. And again we've come to the 12 centimetre mark. So actually the horizontal stretch is not that different when we test it, and it does come straight back to the 10, so it's got a nice retention. So it actually quite surprised me when I first did this test, because I honestly thought I would stretch it and it would go all the way out to 16 or 14, but they actually seem to be pretty much the same. So next what I'll just do is show you the inches. So I'll flip the rule around for us, so we've got our inches. And this one's going to use a little bit more mass, which is kind of a bummer, because mass was never my strong suit, and it did kind of hurt me back when I was in school, because when you're working with fabric, when you're working with patterns, you kind of need a little bit of maths. So instead of 10 centimetres, it's going to be 5 inches. So I've pinned out our 5 inches. I'm going to hold the edge down and I'm going to pull until I feel resistance. And it is about 6 inches. So I'm going to do the maths. So we take that 1 inch, which was the length that it stretched by, and we're going to divide that by 5, which was the original length of our stretch test, which is 0.2. And yes, I did use a calculator to check that. Then we take that 0.2 and times it by 100 to get 20, which is a 20% stretch. Huzzah, they matched, they both worked. So the method for that is a little bit more mathy, a little bit more sciencey, a little bit more impressive. So you just take the length that it stretched by, divide it by the original length of your fabric, and times that number by 100 to get your stretch percentage. Hooray, we did maths! We're so smart. While we're here, we'll just double check that with the Velboa, just to make sure they're both on the same page. So we've got 1 inch, to 5, pull it out till we feel resistance. We're back at 6, and as we know from before, 1 inch divided by 5, 0.2, 0.2 times 100, 20% stretch. So like I said earlier, I was quite surprised by the initial test that I did, because I did think the Velboa would stretch out a lot more. It just felt thinner, more flimsy, but I think it just was a little bit deceiving. So what I did end up doing was I took a spherical pattern and decided to make a spherical minky ball and a Velboa ball. So I made these two balls. I meant to make them a little bit more spherical, but I picked up the wrong pattern, go figure. And on the left I have the Shannon Cuddle in 3, and on the right I have the Velboa. Now it's kind of hard with the camera angles to show, but they are relatively the same size. The difference in width is not that much different. I would say the Shannon is a little bit fatter, but the actual difference that I noticed and that kind of shocked me was that the Velboa is actually a lot taller. If I just pop a block here and press them to the side, you can see that this one has come out a little bit more egg-shaped than the other one. So that was a complete curveball. Of course it could be human error. I did try and make them exactly the same, but I would say that I really did like the seams more on the Velboa, and I didn't trim this one even as much while I was making it, and I would say that the seams are definitely smoother, whereas the Shannon has kind of gone a little bit lumpy as I've stuffed it. Despite me treating them as equally as possible. Just got little holes. So something that made me think about is, I can't put them on the video because I actually took the green one apart. I'll put some pictures up instead. Was I had an Espion Kutari from the Pokemon Center. She lost her tag. And I actually originally made a pattern that was based off her and made a green one out of Shannon Minky. And what happened was the two Kutaris were pretty much identical, but the shiny one came out fatter and wider, which the Shannon has come out wider, the Velboa came out skinnier and taller. And people have said that they think the Velboa is more like what the Pokemon Center tends to use. So I thought that was a little bit of an interesting tidbit. I can't really prove that's why the Espion came out fatter, but it could explain why it did when I was working so hard to make sure the pattern was exactly the same. So if you want to work with Velboa and with Minky, I would say that smaller patterns you can probably use exactly the same as you would with the Shannon Minky. I've made some soft charms with the Velboa, had no differences at all in strength or width or height. The higher you go, obviously the more you will be affected by the any difference in stretch, like this height difference. So you may find if you want to try Velboa, something might end up taller or a little bit skinnier. This is, I think, a little, just a teeny bit skinnier. So you want to make sure you do a test run first before cutting into any fabric, but that is something that you should do anyway. I will keep testing with this. I will keep posting my findings. It will generally be on my Patreon first. If I post anything that I do believe should be made public, like this video, I will make it so. But generally, I tend to stick to my Patreon, so if you want to check it out, I'll put a link in the description. If you want to know more about stretch percentages or testing fabrics, then feel free to comment or send me a message with the questions you have. And I encourage you to try it for yourself, try different fabrics, try doing the stretch test, try everything, you know, because that's what this is all about. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you might have maybe learned something, a little something. If not, feel free to kick me in the pants. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you and goodbye.